Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Ayin Gimel 73. We are our daf, right? Good point. We're smack in the middle of some of the real intense sugyas and shas about Eidim Zomim. We just had a great debate of Abai and Rava whether Eid Zomim Lemafreya Hu Nifsal or Mikanu Lehaba Hu Nifsal. Abai says, I guess, the intuitive thing, which is, once you've proven here that they were lying and you trust the Zomim, then we know that back here when they testified they were lying. So in the interim, they're postulated. Which again doesn't mean that we assume just because they lied once they're going to lie again. But what it means is because they bore false testimony, that labels them as Rishayim and that, or as Eidim Zomim, and that and from a formal sense invalidates their testimony, even if what they were saying was true.
How do you get out of that? You never
Well, you can't, because Rava's response is no, only from this point forward. One explanation is a very fascinating approach in Eidim Zomim. Logically, there's no reason we believe the later group. So if the Torah tells us to, fine, we will. But to the degree that we can actually say that proves that they were lying, we can't say. We just say we take the Torah's status, and the Torah declares them as Eidim Zomim, but we don't sort of know as a fact that they were lying. So that status is going to be from that point on. And if you want to say that status is, we believe that they have testified falsely because there's not a good logic to believe it. We're only going to believe it. If you tell me so, I'll believe it. Okay, so we're only going to believe it from this point forward. That's a very nice conceptual way of thinking about Eidim Zomim, right? But the other way, he says, I really agree to Abaye, it's back here. But as Michael was saying, then everybody, you're never going to know anybody you're going to use to sign your documents. They might be found out 2 years later to be Eidim Zomim, and all those documents will be invalid. So from a pragmatic point of view, certainly when it comes to monetary documents, you can't sort of validate them if they were good, if they were used for personal status issues. But if it comes to monetary documents, we can say that it's going to be kosher just to protect people. But anyway, the halacha is, this is one of the cases we pass like Abai, and we pass them that lemafrei who needs sal. Yes,
my question also is, for instance, Sachem Kuvia, you can get out, you can, regain your status once you destroy or whatever it is. But
so Jenna asked that. There's always possibility of tshuva. Even from Eidim Zomim, there's a possibility of tshuva. So the Gemara in Sanhedrin discusses what type of a tshuva constitutes tshuva. But it's not enough to say, I klopped al chet on Yom Kippur. It has to be practical things that we see. Maybe somebody wants a cup of coffee. Okay, so we put it there. I'll have a reset. Anyway, so it has to be practical things that we see as a community that they have sort of done to change their ways, that allow us to restore our confidence in them. So that gets discussed. Yeah, I know, but it gets discussed in the Sanhedrin. Yes.
So you're saying that someone could be an aid for a get.
Right.
And then 2 years, but because of the personal status issue, we take it seriously.
Right. Then 2 years later, they were found out to be, they signed on a get here. 2 years later, why not? These are people that had been cross-examined in court. The court accepted them. Presumably the best people to use for your get. Right now, we find out that the best people to use for your get are people that never testified in court, because anybody who testified in court might turn out to be an Eidim Zomim. So they testified for a get here. 2 years later, they become Eidim Zomim, and then the get is invalid. Right.
I mean,
that's right. It's disastrous, right? Now, hopefully, the reality is that Eidim Zomim, you assume that if you're going to get mazimim, they're going to come soon after, during this process. It's not going to be 2 years later. But you never know. I mean, I know it's disastrous, so I don't know what to say. That's what Rabbi is saying, and even Rabbi only helps for monetary documents, not for personal status documents.
Right, with Zomim, you're just used for anything.
Right. Exactly.
Money or
yep. Okay, so we passed them like Abai. We have to, whatever the consequences are. But it's mind-boggling to consider that. So now we continue to the two dots, about 5 lines from the top. Okay, Tnan. Now we're going to look at a little bit about how this plays out about the machlokas Abai and Rabbi. Okay, Ganav al Pishnaim. Let's go back to our Mishnah. Somebody burgled based on 2 witnesses. The Tavach Machar PM, the same 2 witnesses said that he slaughtered it or sold it. V'nim Zomim, and they were proven to be Eidim Zomim on the whole shebang. Mishalmim etakol, they pay everything. They pay 4 and 5. Now, my law, she'ilog neva v'chazor idol atvicha. Presumably, first they testified that the guy had stolen, and then they testified he slaughtered and he sold it. Obviously, you won't come to a base and say, I want to bring testimony that so-and-so sold his animal, right? So first you testify that he stole it, and then you burgled it, and then you testify that he slaughtered it. Okay, but who's malagneva v'chadru who's malatvicha? And also, presumably, although we can debate this, when they were found to be zomimim, people say, oh, no, you were with us at that time. So you say that he burgled it on Monday and slaughtered it on Tuesday. Then other Eidim came and they said, you can't say that you were with us. Okay, so first they say you can't say your Monday testimony, you were with us on Monday. And then maybe they come later or they afterward they say, and you can't say your Tuesday testimony because you were with us on Tuesday. You know what you said you saw on Tuesday. Okay, all right, so where's this all going? But 1 minute. If Abaye is right that they became invalid from the time that they testified falsely, even the Itzamulu Geneva, once they were proven to be Eidim Zomimim for the Geneva, right? So it now becomes clear Lemafreya that retroactively when they testified regarding the slaughtering, Psulin Havu, that they were puzzled. Amai Mishamim, why do they pay at Tvicha for the slaughtering? So here's the point. Like, let's say you're on March 1st, okay, at, they sort of said he was Ganav.
We had
okay? What? Yeah, that was at 12 o'clock, okay? And then at 12:05, they said Tavach, okay? 12:05. Now, that's what they testified in court. Then over here, they said, oh, no, and he was Ganav on Sunday and Tavach on Monday. Okay, that's what they said. Okay, and they said, oh, wait, you can't say that you were there and you saw the Geneva on Sunday. You were with us on Sunday. Okay, that's what they say here. Okay, that makes that invalid. Oh, and you can't say that you saw the Tvich on Monday. You were with us on Monday. That makes that invalid. So now the Gemara is saying, when did they become Pasaledim? According to Abaye, when did they become Pasaledim? Now, we say way back here. That was their first act of Eidos Sheker. They became Pasaledim back here. So if at 12 o'clock, we now find out that they were Eidos Sheker, when they at 12:05 testified about the Tvicha, we now find out that they actually were Pasaledim at the time. So now they're not going to be able to become Zomimim on this, because it's like you found out that they were relatives or something. We now see that this not was a false testimony, but was an invalid testimony, because now we see that at 12:05 they were already eating psulim. So how are you going to make them pay for Zomimim for this false testimony if, based on Abaye, at that stage they were already eating psulim? Okay, that's Gemara's question.
So they
got it?
So they only pay kefil.
They should pay kefil, but they shouldn't pay 4 and 5.
Right.
Because by the time they testified 4 and 5, we now see that they were eating psulim. Okay, so the Gemara says, Amai Mishami Matvicha. Why should they pay for the testimony about the slaughtering? Amri, Okay, so the case would be that when they said, you can't say that you were with us, they said, the first thing they said is you were with us on Monday. They first invalidated this one. But the Gemara is going to say, but who cares what they did first? Okay, at the end of the day, we're going to invalidate this one too. So the Gemara says, Amri, sof, big deal. By the end of the day, kihabi mitzmi agneva. By the time these guys get around to saying you can't have said that you were there on Sunday, you were with us on Sunday. So igloi milsa. Now we see retroactively the kiasiru atvicha psulim havu. Amay mishali atvicha. So it doesn't matter when they said, came to court and what order they did it in. At the end of the day, we're going to find out that this was false and this was false. So if this was false and they became psulim here, then this testimony should never have been, accepted in court. And it was not false testimony; it was invalid testimony. So why are they ever going to have to pay? That's pretty brilliant. Like you never would have thought to do that to figure out that math.
The answer is obvious.
Okay, yeah, the answer is obvious. What's the obvious answer?
They testified once. Who says 12 Sunday and Monday? And then something happened also, like at once. But everything happened at once.
All right, so that's obvious to you. And you probably learned this before anyway. So you all know it. So, all right. So the Gemara says, anyway, I'm not sure it's so obvious, but that is what the Gemara says. The Hilchasa, the way to explain it is, okay, so the way is that they said it all at 12 o'clock. Ganav utavach. Okay, they could have said at 12 o'clock, Ganav on Sunday, because it takes time to process testimony. Things take a few minutes. Okay, so here they say.
Well,
It just takes
It
minutes to
makes
say
more sense that we the like Havamina was that they came in one day and said we saw so and so steal it, and then they came in 2 days later and say, oh,
Yeah,
now
but-
we saw him checked it.
Right, but what I was saying is even if they, right, well, that's if they
I'm just saying, like,
right,
that makes
no,
more sense
because,
than a
but
12
yeah,
or a
but
5.
right, I was just saying, even if they all did the same thing at court, it takes a few minutes. Wait a minute, you saw it what day? What was he wearing? Da 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 da. You know, you go a little cross-examining. Now let's talk about your other testimony. I don't think even if they all came to court at the same day, that it's obvious that they would say the whole thing, you know, within 1 minute. Okay, and actually, we're going to talk about not just 1 minute. Toch kidei dibur. Okay, so they said Ganav on Sunday and Tavach on Monday, and they did this all at 12 o'clock. Okay, so then when you retroactively say you were psulim, okay, yes, you're psulim, but even Abai says you can never say, oh, now we see you were puzzle aid, so you can't have been in the zomin because you were puzzle when you were testifying. Like obviously, the lying that makes you puzzle is not going to, for that same act, invalidate the testimony. It only invalidates you moving forward. Okay, so there's all one testimony, and that's how they can pay 4 and 5. Yes.
So even so you're saying when it's Tokidei Dibur, it's plus afas, even though
Right.
it's like Shechita where like you started it and then you finished it, but there's like a 5-second gap between.
Right. But the basic aside, right. Point is that it's considered to be one testimony. Now, Tosa says the reason Bevasachas is considered to be one testimony, this will be a little bit relevant in a few minutes, is because one of the implications of not Bevasachas, usually of Tokidei Dibur, is that you can retract your statement Tokidei Dibur. Like, you know, you can do this in court, you can do this like you make a bracha, you know, right? So if you do sort of correct yourself, toch kidei dibur, you can still correct and, you know, amend your statement. So what?
Like the Omer.
Like the Omer, right. So anyway, what do you mean? Like if you say ba Omer, la Omer?
No,
Right. Okay. So anyway, so therefore, since you can still like correct your original statement, you know, it's all part of the same testimony because you could have even gone back and retracted it. So anyway, so it's all seen as one testimony. So therefore, it's not 2 stages. And then you're made a zomin for that thing that was all said in a few seconds of one another. Then it's all then it's all you're an a zomin on everything. It's not like you were puzzle and then you said something else.
But showing enough, what you're saying is, like, let's say 2 guys come in, you know, and they do it as accepted and processed, and then they're proven to be Aiden Zomin. But then later on, it you know, turns out that they were Krovim.
Correct. And they get off of a zomin or Gazlanim. Right.
They
Okay.
wouldn't even be puzzle, would they? Meaning, like, as individuals?
Right.
For anything? Even though I want
That's an interesting question. Meaning the fact that we know that they were made a sheker even as krovim, would that be enough to make them psulim mikanu haba? They wouldn't be chayiv for hazama, but they might be chayiv just because we now know that they weren't technically made a sheker because it wasn't aided.
Right.
It's an interesting
We
question.
can't trust
It's a really good question. I don't know the answer. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Okay. So the Gemara says, okay, let's say this debate in Abai and Rav is a debate of Tanai. 2 people testified that somebody burgled. Witnesses said that he slaughtered. Who's Mala Gneva? And they were found Zomim on the Gneva. They weren't found Zomim on the Tvicha. It is Shabbat L'Miksas Shabbat L'Kula. So nobody pays anything, right? I mean, not nobody pays anything, excuse me. The Eidim Zomim pay Kefel. They were shown to have lied for the Kefel, but nobody pays for the 4 and the 5, right? Because he doesn't pay, because if he wasn't a Ganev, you can't prove he was a Ganev, you can't prove he's Chayev for slaughtering. They don't pay because they weren't found Zomimim on the Tvicha. Okay, so when you throw out the Geneva piece of the testimony, the Tvicha part of the testimony becomes meaningless. All right. It is about Miksas about Lakula. Where were we? Okay. Who's Malatvicha? Now, let's say that they were just found Zomimim on the Tvicha, not on the original testimony of Geneva. So he was a Ganev, but he wasn't a Toveach Mocher. Okay, so because they've only been proven Zomim on the Tvicha. So who's Malatvicha? Who Misham Tashum Kefel? The Ganev pays Kefel. The Hey Misham Tashum Shlosha. They pay 3 to him, to the Ganev, because now they were trying to make him pay extra. He was only a Ganev. He wasn't a Toveach Mocher. They were Zomimim on the Tvicha and Mechira. All right, that all makes a lot of sense. I'm Rabbi Yossi, says Rabbi Yossi, the Mitzvah Memorim, when is this true? B'shtei eduyot. If the original Eidim gave 2 distinct testimonies, okay, which we'll discuss in a minute what that means. Although the Eidos Achas, if they all gave 1 testimony, presumably it said Ganav v'tavachu machar, right? It was all one big testimony. Eidos Shabbat l'miksas Shabbat l'kula. then if part is both is batal, the whole is batal. Now, what does he mean? We already said if you throw out the gneva, you throw out the tvicha. So what he means is the reverse. If you throw out the tvicha, you're going to throw out the gneva. Okay, which is like a little funny. Like what? Just because they were like lying on the tvicha, they had actually said the gneva thing. They weren't psulim. The psul that any psul happened first. They say ganav, and then they said tavach. So even if they were lying on the tvicha, that happened afterwards in time. That's when they became psulim. How does that invalidate when they said ganav? But presumably, what he's saying is you could go this two ways. You could say we view it all as like the same time, and we say that they were psulim at the same moment, so that even going back a few seconds, the same way could go forward a few seconds. Or his language really is not so much about about invalidating the people as throwing out the testimony. If you see this testimony as one unit, and you're going to throw part of it out, you're going to throw all of it out. Okay, you might be familiar with this in other places. You know, there are questions about pagina dibura. You take half of what somebody said, or do you say batla miksasa batla kula? If part of it is false, you throw the whole thing out. So Rabbi Yossi is less focusing on the people are puzzle, and he's saying if geneva and tvicha mechira is one package, and you're going to throw out the tvicha part because there's zomim of the tvicha, you're going to throw the whole thing out. Okay, so let's take a look at what does this have to do with lemafreya or not? Well, clearly Rabbi Yossi seems to be holding lemafreya, because Rabbi Yossi, can only sort of say that. Well, let's take a look at what the Gemara says. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Now, my b'shtei eduyot umay be'edus achas. What do we mean two testimonies and what do we mean one? Ilema b'shtei eduyos b'shtei eduyos mamash. Really, two separate testimonies. B'shtei kitot, meaning it's two separate groups of witnesses come to testify. Group A says ganav, and Group B says tavach umacha. And there he says, when you throw out the tvicha, you won't throw out the geneva. Okay, but that's two eduyos. And what is beidus achas? Bekas achas, bezachar zeh. So maybe edus achas means one group, Group A, but at separate times, at 12 o'clock and then at 1 o'clock. So 1 minute. If that's what edus achas means, and they're at 12 o'clock they say ganav, and at 1 o'clock they say tavach umachar, how, because they were lying with the tavach umachar, can you throw out what they said an hour ago? So the Gemara says, the Amar Rabbi Yossi beidus achas bekas achas bezechar zeki misadi. So he would say with one testimony, one group, one testimony after the other. He masidi agneva. First they testify at 12 o'clock on the gneva. Later masidi atvicha. At 1 o'clock they testify on the slaughtering. He mitzmi atvicha when they found zomim on the slaughtering. You're going to throw the whole thing out. So itzamulu agneva. There'll be zomimim. It doesn't literally mean zomimim, but they'll be invalid, or the testimony will be invalid when they testified about the gneva. Where do you get that from? Okay, so that's a great, by the way, talk about like good idioms from the Gemara, like where does this come from? Like, where would you get that from? Okay, so where would this idea come from? Like, how could, because they were found zomim at 1 o'clock, you throw out for, something that they testified on an hour ago? Elolav, what he must mean is that when is it that you don't package it all together? Shtei edus, you consider it separate testimonies, beidus achas, ke'ein shtei edus. It means two testimonies. It means it's actually one testimony that's like to. Umayniyu, what's one testimony like to? Kasachas b'zechar zeh, one group. First they did one, and then an hour later they did the other. Even 10 minutes later they did the other. Aval beidus achas bevas achas. So what does he mean when he says it's one testimony? It means that it's all at the same time. It's like toch kidei dibur. Lo. Then we would say that. Then you would say that if it's all one group testifying at the same time, like toch kidei dibur, even if you throw out the second half of their testimony, you got to throw the whole thing out. All right. So why do the rabbis argue on that? That makes a lot of sense. You view it all as one package. So the Gemara says savri. Now we're going to assume. I'm sorry. The savrua. Now we are assuming the kulei ama toch kidei dibur kedibur dami. Everybody, both Rabbi Yossi and the Rabbanan, would hold to the principle of toch kidei dibur. Okay, that makes sense, right? That's a pretty generally assumed principle. Everybody agrees that defines things as being in one unit, taking place in one moment in time. Okay, so therefore, why did the Rabbanan argue? If it's all toch kidei dibur testimony, and you threw out the tvicha, you should throw out everything. You should throw out the gneva. So, my lab, the hakamifligi, this must be what it's debating about. The Rabbanan savri mikanu lo bahu nifsal. V'kivan d'miyahi sha'ata kamitzmi atvicha to kamitzmi. So they'd say like Rava, that it's only from this point onwards, and since it's only from this point onwards that they are defined as zomimim, and the testimony is defined as invalid. Atvicha to kamitzmi itzam, for the shchita that they've been found zomim, they're zomimim. Agneva the lo nitzami lo itzam, but for the gneva they're not considered zomim. So what does that mean? They said here at one time, Gana v'tava chumacha. These Eidim Zomim months later said, no, I'm sorry, buddy, you weren't, the Tvicha's a lie, okay? Right, everybody with me? So Rabbi Yossi says this is all one package. This is one Eidos. You threw away part of it, throw the whole thing out. That's according to Abaye. But according to Rava actually says, no. For the last 5 months, this actually, they were kosher witnesses, and, and maybe like the testimony was kosher testimony. What we're saying is starting at December 1st, right? Starting December 1st, we're saying the tvich for this entire time, okay, they were kosher, and ganav utavach was a kosher testimony. Starting on December 1st, the tvicha gets thrown out of court. Okay, that's the principle, like, only mishas chidusha ve'elach. And starting at this point in time, they become pasul witnesses. Okay, so fine. So how would we throw out the whole package? Back here they were kosher. Back here the whole testimony was accepted as a package. We're only going to throw this out a long time later. Okay, so we're not gonna. It's no longer like one package, to throw out. All right. So that would be what the Chachamim would say, and Rabbi Yossi would say, no, you go back here, and at this moment they become pasul, the Eidos becomes pasul, the Eidos is never good, you throw the whole thing out. Okay, Rabbi Yossi savar l'mafrehu nifsal. No, it's retroactive. As soon as they testified their pasul. Now again, I've been trying to talk about throwing out the Eidos because I've been trying to be accurate with what Rabbi Yossi says. The Gemara seems to be focusing on invalidating the witnesses. Okay, so Rabbi Yossi says from this moment they're invalid, and therefore you throw out the testimony, right? And therefore, so because it's retroactive. Whereas if you said Nikanu Lahaba, you only invalidated them here. So of course the testimony of Geneva remains good. They only became invalid here, but the Geneva testimony never got thrown out. Okay, but Rabbi Yossi says, as soon as they testified, they became invalid. When they became invalid witnesses because of the testimony of the slaughtering, they also became invalid for the testimony of the Geneva. Because everybody presumably holds Tokadei Dibur. So look, this debate is the debate of Abaye and Rava. Rabbi Yossi clearly holds. Rabbi Yossi is clearly Abaye. Rabbi Yossi clearly holds you go back retroactively, you look at that time, you say that the tvicha was no good, so you throw out the whole Eidos, so you throw out the whole Eidim, right? From that point onwards, which includes the point of the Geneva, which happened a few seconds earlier. Rabbi Yossi is clearly Abaye, retroactive. The question is, what does the Chachamim hold? So we're saying the Chachamim hold like Rava, Mikanu Rabba. So since back then they were kosher, they've been kosher for the last few months, you're not going to throw out the Geneva part of the testimony. Okay, so the Gemara says, no, because we're going to, since we passed them like Abaye, we're going to sort of say that everybody here now goes according to Abaye. So the Gemara says like this: Amri no, if everybody were to agree that everybody would say retroactive, meaning everybody holds like Abaye, it is retroactive. Okay, and if everybody were to say Tokadei Dibur, everybody would agree. You throw out the whole testimony, even the Geneva part that came before, because it was all one unit. Okay, the debate is: do you hold of the principle of Tokadei Dibur? Do you hold that something that is maybe, if it were, you would, now again, there's degrees, like maybe you could hold of Tokadei Dibur that I can correct the statement that I just said, but maybe something that's conceptually distinct, like if I'm going to say Ganav, and then I'm going to say Tavachu Machar. So conceptually, Tavachu Machar is a separate testimony from the Ganav. We're not going to use Tokadei Dibur to turn it into one testimony. Okay, so there's always a question when you deny Tokadei Dibur. What do you mean? Like, how does my first word in my sentence be the same testimony as the last word in my sentence? There's got to be a certain time where you define something as one unit. But if it's conceptually two units, the fact that it's Tokadei Dibur is not going to make it all one. So the rabbis would say, even if this is 1201, 0.00, and this is 12, 10, whatever, that's 10 seconds later. Those are two separate testimonies. And therefore, just because you threw out this part, they only became puzzle at 12 o'clock and 10 seconds. And the testimony of 12 o'clock and 10 seconds is a distinct testimony, and what they testified before remains valid. So everybody agrees it's retroactive. The question is, if it was said Tokdei Dibur, does it force it all to be seen of as one moment in time and one testimony? Let me just turn the part. We don't treat it as all one statement. Rabbi Yossi said Tokdei Dibur, Kedibur Dami, and he says, no, it is one statement. And if you throw a part of it, even the second part, you're going to throw the whole part out. Okay, there's a question. No,
I'm saying that you can one is arguing that you can separate two parts of a sentence and say the person's guilty for this part and not for that part.
Correct.
The other one's
Well,
saying
certainly the second
can't
part. You can
separate.
throw out the second part without throwing out the
The
first
other
part.
one say you can't separate.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can even differentiate and say it depends how you say it. If you said he stole and slaughtered, then it's clearly one thing. If you said he stole,
Right.
he slaughtered. You know what I mean?
Right. So I agree with you. Meaning that's what I said before. Like, is it all just about the amount of time? Like, certainly everybody would agree that if I have one topic to testify about and it takes me 5 minutes to describe what I'm talking about, we don't say each one of those is a separate testimony, right? So how, there should be other contextual factors or other factors that determine whether to package it all as one unit or not. I agree. To some degree, we're going to see that now, but the Gemara is not getting into that. Yes.
They have like cases. I mean, there were charges that were brought. I mean, or I'm trying to think.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. Like, you could have a case, like, the Gemara often discusses, like, I bring you to court and I bring the witnesses, like, which is how you would imagine it. But you could also have a case where witnesses just come and say, we come up and knock on the court and say, we saw something, we're good citizens reporting on something that we saw.
Okay.
You don't need, technically, everything, you don't need a litigant. I mean, I think that's even true in civil court, not in civil, in criminal court, when it's a crime against a person, right? Even though technically the state doesn't need somebody to press charges, right? They're not going to bother to pursue it on most cases unless the victim is pressing charges, right? But yeah, in a civil court, you definitely need a litigant. But in these cases, in theory, the witnesses could just show up on their own. Okay, so now the Gemara says like this. For Rabbi Yossi said, okay, so the Gemara says, "V'savar Rabbi Yossi Tokdei Dibur Kedibur Dami." Whoa, 1 minute. Now this is really going to be a question. However you explain the position of the Chachamim, Rabbi Yossi clearly says it's all one package. And if you throw out the Tzvicha, you throw out the Geneva. But 1 minute, does he really hold Tokdei Dibur Kedibur Dami? Why not? So V'hatznan, we got in the Mishnah. Somebody says, "Harezo Tmuras Ola Tmuras Shalomim." Harezu Tmuras Ola. Divrei Meir. So people remember what a Tmura is? Tmura is you have an animal that's kadosh. And you say now, if that animal gets a mum and a blemish, you can redeem it on money. But if it doesn't have a mum, you can't redeem it. And even if it does have a mum, you can't go ahead and try to transfer the kedusha from animal 1 straight to animal 2. That's called a tmura, and an exchange. And the Torah says, if you try to exchange, vayahu tmurato yeh kodesh. So what you try to sanctify is sanctified, but the animal itself retains its original sanctity. So let's say you had a ola and a shlomim here in front of you, okay? And you took this other animal, this third animal, you said, hey, this animal is a tmura ola, tmura shlomim. Okay, so what were you trying to do? Were you trying to transfer the ola kedusha, the shlomim kedusha? Were you correcting yourself? Were you trying to do both? So Rabbi Meir says you go by the first part of your statement. You said tmura ola, that took effect. The animal has the second animal has the kedusha of an ola. First one remains as it was. Divrei Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi Amar, im lekach nitkavein mitchila. If, and here gets to questions of intent or context, if you were intending from the very outset to make this animal both an ola and a shlomim, okay, you thought you could make it half and half. So, however, now you can't get both words out of your mouth at the same time. One of those two words has to come first. Okay, so therefore, we don't say we're going to force the first half of your sentence. Clearly, you were trying to say both, and you had to get the words out in a particular order. So in that case, Dvarav Kayamim, we'll accept the whole sentence. Now, it sounds like we ask you, what were you intending? Right, which is interesting. Like, when do we go by your claim of what you thought? Tosfos tries to say, Tosfos questions this. He says that would be Dvarim Shabalev. Maybe we use other evidence to indicate what you were intending or whatever. But anyway, let's just go with what he says. He says, if we know somehow that that's what you were trying to say, then we don't chop the sentence in half. That was one statement and it all applies. And the animal's half of each. What do you do with an animal that's half each? So you wait till it gets a mum, a blemish, and you transfer half of its value to money that's going to be used for an ola, and the other half of its value to money that's going to be used for a shlomim. Okay, but you've succeeded in making it half each. Okay, Amar Tmuras Ola the Nimlach Amar Tmuras Shlamim. If, however, you changed your mind, you said Tmuras Ola, Tmuras Shlamim. Right? It was clear you're trying to correct yourself. So in that case, Harezo Tmuras Ola, then you're stuck. It's a Tmuras Ola, which is basically a principle that you don't say Tokadei Dibur, even to amend your statement, let alone when you're saying something else. Now, there could still be a difference between amending your statement and continuing your statement. You're in court and you're spending 5 minutes describing what occurred. That's one testimony. That's all a continuation of your statement. But a correction of your statement, something new, to revise, whatever, I'm sorry, once you said it, you're stuck by it. Now, you could also say, is it the same? Maybe when you sanctify something, that's all about speech and the power of speech to create metaphysical realities, as it were. Maybe that happens immediately. Maybe court is always more about a process. It is about speech, but it's about a process, cross-examination, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe by court there's different rules. Okay, but the Gemara here, as it often does, assumes until it's forced to say otherwise, that's going to be all the same rules across the board. So here Rabbi Yossi says, you don't say Tokadei Dibur. How could he say in our case, you throw it all out? Clearly he's saying it's all one testimony. Did you want to say something, Jenna?
Oh no, I'm just thinking about the Darim and like what we talk about. I don't know. We had a similar conversation of like, why does it matter until 11? And like, why we were trying to figure out why it's okay to shift what you were meaning in a Darim, but not in other places. I wonder how that fits in.
You mean like we say an idea of pivili b'shavin, that what you're thinking has to be consistent with what you're saying, and so on.
Or we
Right.
go retroactively and say,
Right.
oh,
I mean, that's obviously
actually
another
need to-
thing to say. The opposite argument from the power of speech argument is that by things that are hafla, speech acts or whatever, that create these metaphysical changes, it's critical that your speech is in sync with what you're thinking. And here you're basically saying, no, I actually accidentally said the wrong thing. Right? So if I could do like a hataras nidarim, to say that I hadn't intended, here you clearly, the wrong words came out of your mouth, So yeah, those are all really good questions. Okay, but let's see how the Gemara resolves it. So the Gemara says, so here Rabbi Yossi doesn't seem to care about the fact that you corrected yourself. And here he seems to consider it one testimony. You could make other distinctions. You could say, you're not allowed to correct yourself. No, you can't give emendations. But anything you say within Tokadei Dibur is all considered part of one whole, right? There's so many different ways you could distinguish between why here it's one testimony and there you can't correct yourself. But the Gemara gives what I consider to be a very technical and boring way of distinguishing between the two. So let's see what the Gemara says. Okay, so we asked on this. Dimlach pshita. If you change your mind, meaning at a later time, of course you're stuck with what you first said. The Amar Rav Papa, so Rav Papa says, no, here's the Chiddush. The Chiddush is Nimlach B'Tokadei Dibur Kavarina. Even if you corrected yourself within Kadei Dibur, Rabbi Yossi would say you can't amend your statement and it's still a Tmuras Ola. So there he doesn't hold of Tokadei Dibur, you can't amend it. And here he holds that if it's Tokadei Dibur, it's one unit. So a million ways to distinguish the two cases. Let's see what the Gemara says. So the Gemara says, Amri, no, here's how you could answer it. Trey Tokadei Dibur Habe. There are two measures of Tokadei Dibur. Chad Kidei She'elas Talmid L'Rav. One is the time it takes a student to ask after the well-being of his Rebbe, which is basically Shalom Alecha Rebbe Umori. Okay, that's a long Tokadei Dibur. The Chad, and the other one is Kidei She'elas Rav L'Talmid. When the Rav greets the Talmud, he says Shalom Aleichem. Okay, or Shalom Alecha. So it's twice as long. It's a half a second or a second. Okay, so Rabbi Yossi holds of the Tokadei Dibur of the half second, but not of the second. Okay, I think they've got to be the most boring distinction possible. Okay, so Ki Leisleil Rabbi Yossi. When does Rabbi Yossi not hold of Tokadei Dibur that you can't amend your statement in this case of Ola and Shlamim? Kidei She'elas Talmid L'Rav. The longer one, if it took 4 words, 1 full second. Okay, Kidei She'elas Talmid L'Rav. Shalom Alecha Rebbe Umori. Nofish, that's long. But Kidei She'elas Rav L'Talmid, but the time it takes a Rav to ask the Talmud, Shalom Alecha, Islay, then he would say it's all one package. Okay. So anyway, a lot more other ways we could have distinguished between a court case and a kedusha case, between amending versus appending, all these types of differences that the Gemara ignores. But bottom line here is a fascinating idea that according to Rabbi Yossi, right, if you say L'mafrei hu nifsal, even if you throw out the second part of the statement, if it's all Tokadei Dibur in one statement, then you throw out the whole statement. Okay, so that certainly assumes Abaye of Lemafreya Hunifsal. By the way, I want to read one line in Tosfos because it's a famous position of Rabbeinu Tam. What is the logic of Tochidei Dibur? So, so usually you say, because there's got to be a amount of time that we say defines things as all taking place within the same time, so I mean, and the idea, the most radical example that Tokhtei Dibur, like there's different ways you could sort of say it. You could say that it's dealing with this thing very fundamentally, and that's why the Dibur, the nature of the speech act, as we were sort of saying, like speech is trying to articulate what you're thinking, but like you can't always say everything in one moment, and those aren't, and sometimes you get things wrong or whatever. So there's like, thinking of the speech act, there's a certain amount of time that we view things as like one unit, correctable, all one type of speech, as different acts of speech and so on. Okay, that's so like I think you've talked to Dibur specifically in the context of an act of speech, right, and defining it as one unit or not. But there's another example of Tokhtei Dibur, which is an extreme example, which is somebody hears that his father dies and he does Kriya. And then it turns out like, oh, actually, when we told you your father died, he hadn't died yet, but he died the second after you did Kriya. Oh, well, it was Tokhdei Dibur, so the Kriya counts. Okay, so that's like, the Kriya occurred before the father died, but because it was Tokhdei Dibur of the death, it counts. So that seems to be an idea that Tokhdei Dibur is considered to be defining halachically what's considered the same moment in time. Okay? Like, what's a degree of precision of measuring the same moment in time? All right, so that's the questions of Tokhdei Dibur. Either thinking about it as a speech act type of a thing, or thinking about it as a moment in time. Rabbeinu Tam has a very strange, it's strange because it's like it just seems out of nowhere idea, because he's bothered with why is the measure Shalom Alecha and Shalom Alecha Reb Yumari, like why are we using that as the measure? So if you take a look at Tosfos, the Tosfos Kilesle the Reb Yossi, he says here in the following: it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines down from the beginning of the wide lines in Tosfos, like 5 words in. So he says the following. He says the following. He says, Mefarish Rabbeinu Tam, the Hainu Taima. This is the reason of Tokhtei Dibur. Because Shadam Me'id Edut. If a person is giving testimony, because another time you can use Tokhdei Dibur is you're buying something and then you want to back out or change your mind or change the conditions or whatever. So there you are. Now you can imagine this in the marketplace. You're trying to do some transaction and somebody comes up, oh, hi, how you doing? Like, what? I'm trying to buy something here. So you have to say, oh, hello, and then get back to what you're doing. Okay, of course, it's a little funny. Imagine this in court. I hereby testify or whatever. You're in the middle of testimony. Hey, how you doing? Anyway, so, right. I don't remember that scene. Oh, Rabbi, either your friend or your Rebbe gives you a hello. You have to stop your business transaction or your testimony and say hello back. Why? Somebody gave you a hello and you didn't respond. So of course in court you better respond, because then if you're not, you're a goslin and they'll throw out your testimony. Anyway, so since sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you have to respond back, so the rabbi said we're not going to consider that an interruption. We allow for that, but he makes it all like a rabbinic takana. Now it's very funny. If it's a rabbinic takana, it's like here it has all these implications for edus, for like for neder, for all these things. Like to make this a rabbinic takana is a very strange way of framing it. Like again, you could have said because of those realities we define that what means the same period of time of speaking allows for those types of small interruptions. But the word takana is a funny word, right? You could have said l'kach amru chachamim, that this is all considered to be the same period of time. But he says this word of takana. But obviously, because it's this type of thing that it's about talking and being interrupted, he has the problem with the Gemara about the kriya. Okay, then he says, if you skip to the end of that line, he says, umiyu b'perek. What would be the whole thing? That if you don't allow for Tokhdei Dibur, you don't allow a Talmud to respond. At the end of Nidarim, this reason doesn't work. Why? Leaning Kriya. the case about doing Kriya. Because Mace, he thought that his father had died, the Karav, Achach Mace, and then he died afterwards. He Mace Toch De Dibur, Yatsi De Kriya, Yatsi De Kriya. So what does that have to do with interrupting your speech and not considered an interruption in your speech? Vasa Mashayosh hears that. All right, maybe that's only Rabbi. It's the rabbis go easy in Avelus situations. So you're right, but it doesn't really fit. Okay, we'd have to give some other explanation to that. But the basic question is, I would like to take out the takana part of Rabbeinu Tam and say the two explanations of Tokatei Dibur is one is it's defining halachically what does it mean that something occurred at the same moment in time, and the other is the question of a speech act, and we forget this question about tiknu, but the point is we can't get all of our words out at once. Sometimes, there are moments of interruption and so on. And what is defined, and our thoughts are sometimes we say wrong things and we need to correct them. And what's defined as one type of a speech act as opposed to two speech acts, right? That's I think the more the more natural way of saying it. All right. So back to the Gemara now. Amar Rava, middle of Ayin Gimel Amid Bet. So now we've dealt with it works retroactive, and if it's Tokatei Dibur, you throw the whole testimony out, even if the only thing that was invalidated was the second part of it. Amar Rava. Now it says Rava. Now remember, this isn't directly connected to the question of retroactive or Mikam Haba, but there are ways they might intersect. Witnesses were first contradicted, and then they were made Eidim Zomim. Okay, so witnesses said Ruvain, killed Shimon on Sunday, and other witnesses said you can't say that. Ruvain was with us at a ball game on Sunday. They don't say you were with us. They say Ruvain was with us. Okay, or they could say we were at that spot. What you said it happened, at the intersection of whatever these two streets. We were at that spot at that time, and we didn't see it happen. So it's contradictory testimony, but it's not hazama. It's not saying you were with us. Okay, so that Rava says, let's say first that happened. Now we said if the Eidim became puzzle, then retroactively they won't have been Eidim Zomim. But let's say the Eidim didn't become puzzle. Let's say first you threw out their testimony because it was contradicted, which doesn't mean we believe the second group. It just means we can't believe either group. Okay, so we throw it out. You can even have a case where we throw it out because we know it's wrong. They say Reuven killed Shimon, and then Shimon walks into court. I love that case. Bahar Taragla. Okay, so we know it's false, but it's not Zomin. Okay, and then it's Zomin. Then witnesses come and say, "Oh, you were with us on that day." Do we say since the testimony has already been thrown out, okay, you can no longer turn them into Eidim Zomimim? Or do we say, it's all part of the process of destroying their testimony? So we don't sort of make that. We're not saying they were puzzled at the time they testified. So we're not sort of making, so therefore this is not contradictory, or this does not prevent us from continuing on to make them into Eidim Zomimim. Okay, so that's what he says. So they were first proven to be false, or it was contradicted, and then they were Zomimim. In a case, let's say they testified Reuven killed Shimon. Neherogim, they could still become Eidim Zomim and be put to death if they were found Eidim Zomim after. The process of contradiction is seen as the beginning of a process of making them Eidim Zomimim. I mean, obviously don't need to work through that process, but it's all part of the same process of attacking their testimony. So it's not like, the testimony's already been contradicted. We can't, there's no longer, we can't no longer make it Eid Zomim. They've already been thrown out. You don't say that.
Is that saying that
yes.
is the same thing?
I'm sorry, it was the beginning of a process, but it hadn't been complete. The Zomim is the full completion of the process, presumably because, ignore my example where Reuven walks in, the victim walks in alive into court. No, but certainly it makes sense if a chash is just, we don't know who's telling the truth. So we don't know who's telling the truth. We didn't accept your testimony because we have contradictory testimony, okay? But now the process of throwing out your testimony has begun, but it hasn't ended. It began because it might be false, and we're not going to use it, but making it Zomimim is like the end of the process, because now we know for certain that it's false. We know you're lying because we know you're Zomim. I'm sorry, Hilla, what was your question?
I'm actually not sure if there's any non-community at all, but is it saying that Hakasha is the same thing as Hazama, except it's missing a kind of finality, or is it saying that these Eidim Zomim complete what Eidim Eidus Hachasha started.
I don't see it. I mean, you're right. The language is saying those things, but I see it. I'm reading it more in a minimalist way, and just sort of saying that the process of Hachasha doesn't prevent us from, it's not seen as like until now we've been talking about ways that we can't make you an something. You're proved to have been a Goslin. You're proved to, we threw out the Tvicha testimony, so it undermined this testimony. You were Lamafreya, who Nifsal, etc. And here we're just saying, like, because these are all about contradicting the testimony, it doesn't get in the way of us processing the Hazama case. Okay, but conceptually, because Tchilas Hazama meaning, not like it's a necessary part of the process, not like we call it Hazama, the process is very different. One is saying you were with us and the other is saying whatever, but just that it's consistent with, like, the idea of Hazama that's going to come afterward. All right, so the Gemara says like this, Amarava, Minala, where do I get this idea from? Titania, we turn a Brisa. Midani Beish Ploni, we testify about Reuven. He blinded his servant, knocked out the eye, and afterwards knocked out the tooth. Now you realize the servant goes free if either an eye or a tooth or any limb or whatever is destroyed. But the question here is going to be, what order did it happen in? So it's better for the slave, I say servant, slave, it's better for the slave that it should have been first the tooth and then the eye. Because if it's first the tooth, then he becomes a free man. And then the eye got knocked out, and then he gets compensated for the loss of the eye. Okay, as if it's the reverse, he gets compensated for the loss of the tooth. Compensated for the loss of the eye is much bigger than the compensation for the loss of the tooth. Okay, so they testified, first he blinded his slave, and then he knocked out the eye, and then he knocked out the tooth. Harav Omer came. The master is happy with that testimony. At least he's happy with that order. And the Gemara is going to say, if there was no preceding testimony against him, he would not be happy with that. That's going to make him lose a slave and pay for the tooth. But assuming that the alternative is the opposite order, he's happy to have them testify this order. Okay? Now they were found zomin. So again, assuming that, for whatever reason, and this is what Rav is going to use to prove his case, that the backdrop is the alternative was the opposite order. So then they, in their testimony, helped the owner. They helped the owner that they knocked down his payment from the payment of an eye to the payment of a tooth. So if they're zomimim, who do they have to pay? If they're zomimim, who do they pay? The slave. They pay the slave the difference between the value of the eye and the value of the tooth. Right, you got it? Because there was the other order that had been assumed, and they reversed the order. They're helping the master and hurting the slave, knocking it down to the value of the tooth. So mishalmim demei ayin le'eved. They paid the cost of the eye to the slave minus the tooth. So okay, that's a thing. Now Rabbi says, where do we get the backdrop that the opposite order was assumed? Right? Hey chidami, what's the case? Ilema tiriktani, like it is, like they were the first to come into court with these witnesses. The leka kasachrina, there's no other witnesses. Mishamim demei ayin le'eved, they have to pay the slave for the eye. So before they came, the slave was a slave. There was no, they were making the master liable. After they freed him, they're going to have to pay for his eye, meaning their testimony was helping the slave if nothing preceded them. They were getting the slave free. And more than that, to make who were they hurting if nothing preceded them? They were hurting the owner. They were saying the owner had to free his slave, and they were lying about it. And in addition, Rav Omer came, the master is happy with their testimony. Rav he's not happy with their testimony. If they're the first people to show up to court, before them, he was going to get off. Elalav, the only way this makes sense, and obviously this is correct, is there was a backdrop that the opposite had been assumed. He goes to Asu Beitre, two other people had already come to court earlier. The Amri and said, they said the opposite order. First it was the tooth and then it was the eye. That was assumed before this other group came, the opposite order. The master would have had to free him and pay him for his eye. Then this middle group came. The Amri, no, the reverse order. It was the eye and then the tooth. So they're now helping the master. That's why Rav Omer came. No, it was the opposite order, and you only have to pay for the tooth, you don't have to pay for the eye. They're helping the master and they're hurting the slave. The Kamma now, but Rabbi says, so that's got to be the case. I mean, it's a great argument, okay? But now the question is, but 1 minute. If that's true, they came to court when there was already another testimony in place. Their testimony started off as mucheshes, right? The court would have thrown them both out, or at least they might have not thrown. That's interesting. Presumably, they would have freed the slave. but they, because they're both testifying that the slave goes free. Okay, although based on different circumstances. But presumably they would have thrown out the testimony about the eye or the tooth because they can't figure out which one, right? It's another interesting question, where they've taken the common denominator of the two, whatever. But anyway, he's saying, look, this starts as a case of hachasha. Okay, it's actually even more radical than Rav's case, because it never was accepted. From the very moment it was testified, it already was facing a contradictory testimony. And nevertheless, it is seen as a testimony that then will actually allow for it to become Eidim Zomimim afterwards. So you see, we have a chasha that ends in Eidim Zomimim. Now, by the way, I just have to say, not to confuse you, but it'll come up later. The problem is that Eidim only become Eidim Zomimim after Gemar Din. Okay, after the base in Paskin, you're right, so-and-so is Chayav. So in a normal case of Rava, where the hachasha comes later, you could say, they came, they testified X, this person had committed murder. The court said, okay, we accept the testimony, Ruvain is chayav, to be executed, he committed murder. And then it was, other witnesses came and contradicted, and then other witnesses came and made them zomim. So you can have a hachasha and a hazama that all occurs after the Gemar Din, and that's Rava's case, that the hachasha doesn't prevent the hazama. But in this case, it's very bizarre. If they started out with a contradictory testimony, how did you ever get to the stage of Gemar Din to make them Eidim Zomimim? Everybody sort of get the problem? Okay, so we're going to sort of see it in we'll discuss that later in the Gemara. The basic answer is going to be is that they're testifying that there was another court that had a Gemar Din about this case. It'll be confusing. That's tomorrow. Whatever. We'll worry about that tomorrow. Let's not borrow tomorrow's problems for today. Okay? But anyway, but that's the point. Where it says, look, the only way this makes sense is if there was a backdrop of another testimony. And nevertheless, even though it starts off as contradictory, they're going to be able to be made Eidim Zomim. So you see, Hachasha Tchilas Hazama. So the Gemara says, the first ones are contradicting the middle ones, and then the middle, because there's the last ones that make them Zomim. Okay, the Hainu Sharei Rav Omer came, and that's why the rabbi, the master, likes the testimony. He likes what they're saying because they're reversing the order, right? So clearly the other Tatas had to precede it. The Ketani even needs to Zomimim. And then it says that the middle ones are found Zomim because a later group came. Mitziyai Meshamim, so the middle ones paid to make Ayin Le'evet. Shmami no, Chasha Tchilas Hazama. You see, even though it started off as a Chasha, it can still process it as Hazama, and then they can actually have to pay. A very nice proof. Let's see what Abai responds. No, that's not how to read the case. No. The case is the first ones came and said, here was the order. Okay, it was the ayin and then the shame. And actually, you're right. Based on that alone, the master wouldn't be happy. You're making him free his slave. And actually, they're hurting the master. They're not hurting the slave. But then the second group came and said, first of all, Imanu Ayisem Bosayom. You can't testify. You're Eidim Zomim. You were with us. But if you want to know what happened was the opposite order happened. Okay? So this is like really a fascinating case, right? Because at the time they testified, we thought they were hurting the master. And that, but not, right? Because nothing had been in court accepted before that. They were telling the master you got to free his slave. Then they were provinating Zomimim, and then witnesses said, oh, and by the way, actually, the slave should go free, but it was the opposite order. So in hindsight now, we see that what they actually were doing was that they were hurting the slave and not the master, which is an interesting question. Let's say they didn't know about that other testimony, right? Is it about what their kavanah was, who they were trying to hurt? Or was it objectively speaking, now that we know what really happened, we see, maybe that other testimony never would have been accepted in court. So this is like Abaye's interesting approach, that you can testify afterwards to the facts, and that will reframe what was the impact of the false testimony of the Eidim Zomimim to determine who they have to pay. Okay, and therefore he says it does not have to start with a chasha. It could start with hazama, and then you enter the different testimony into court. Okay, so we'll continue with this tomorrow.
Right, it's like what's the impact, but also like what's their intention? Maybe
well, that's what I